Hello everybody. So today I am going to be giving you a general overview of Google Classroom, as I'm assuming some of you are needing to use this and you haven't used it before. So quickly, what is Google Classroom? Well, Google Classroom is what you would call an online learning environment. So these vary, and there's a bunch of them, but essentially Google Classroom is the one that Google offers, and it's integrated with all of the other Google services such as Google Docs, Google Drive, Calendar, Gmail, and some other ones such as that. So the idea is you have an online environment that kind of takes over your classroom setting. All of your assignments and materials go through this, and you have this place to digitally connect with your students. So some of you might have heard of Moodle before. That is one. Some universities use that. Some schools use that. It's one that gets extended more, and it's closer to what used to be wiki spaces, which has also been used as online and learning environments. Some businesses and some teachers actually use Blackboard. That's another example of it. Um, there's various career guidance programs that are being used currently that are versions of online learning environments. So, today we're going to look at the Google version, the Google Classroom. That's only been out for 5 years or so, but it's improved drastically and it's now one of the major products in the space. So, quick to note, there's a difference between normal Google Classroom and education Google Classroom. So whenever we're talking about this and you're in a school education setting, make sure you're using your education emails, and your students similarly should be using their education emails. So it'll be whatever your name or whatever your user at your school. So in this case, I'm not going to be using that. I'm going to be using a personal user to show you stuff, but in your case, make sure you're using your teacher account. So to find Google Classroom, you can open any web browser and you can just search Google Classroom if you want. But if you're on a Google page, you can go up here to the top right corner and you'll see the 9 dots. That is your Google Apps drawer. So if you open that up, you might see some apps here, and if you don't see Google Classroom right away, you can always scroll and it should eventually show up. So there's Google Classroom. Now let's say you want to move this so you can actually see it properly, because you're going to need to use this a lot more often. Then what you can do is, if you click and hold the icon and then scroll with your scroll wheel, or just move up, you'll be able to kind of move it higher and higher. And then you can move it to this part, and there's this line here. The line is what's hidden. So if you first open it up, you'll see everything to the line. So now Google Classroom is in my main section of the apps. You can move it up even further if you want, but that's one way to create a shortcut, and that's accessible from every single page on a Google service. So I'm going to click that to go there. You can also just go to your web browser and go to classroom.google.com. So you should reach a page that somewhat resembles this. Now I'm already in one classroom. You'll recognize it as the digital classroom that I use for the other tutorials. But today I'm going to show you how to create one. So when you reach this page, and we'll zoom it in slightly further here, you're going to see a few things. You'll see potentially a classroom in the middle if you're already in one and you didn't know so. You'll see the hamburger icon up here to open up further things, and there it'll show your settings, your classrooms and a to-do list, calendar and classes. If you're a student in some and a teacher in others, you'll see another divider here for that. You'll also see a plus sign on the right side, and that says create or join a class. Now, if you only see join the class, then you need to call your IT and ask them for help, because you are restricted for some reason. Perhaps your account got flagged as a student for some reason on setup. So that's something you need to speak to your employer's IT about to get added. You'll also see again the 9 icons I mentioned, the Google Apps drawer, which you'll find on everything and you'll be able to see, and then just your account preferences there. So we're going to go to the plus sign and we're going to say create a class. Now, you shouldn't see this if you're in Google Education. If you do see this and you are creating one for your school, then you need to go back and make sure you're using your education user, because chances are it's using your personal email to create it. So I'm seeing this because I'm on a personal email account, but if you're creating one for Google, for a classroom, an actual K-12 classroom, then you need to make sure you're using the proper account for it. So, after that, if you see it, deal with it. If you don't, you should see this. So you get a few things to add on there. Class name, a section, a subject, and a room. So let's say the class name is My First English Classroom. Section and subject is your choice. Subject, you normally want to put your class, so maybe it's English 12. Section, a lot of the time people will put the period it is, so maybe it's period 2 for you. Some people would also put the semester, so maybe you want to say winter 2020. It's your choice on that. Room number, you don't really need it, but you can put it if you want. And create. And then it might take a second, and you should see it come up like this. So then Google will give you a couple tips as you're going through like this that'll pop up if this is your first time. So the idea is Google Classroom works on the basis of classroom codes. So the way that works is, as you saw it highlighted there, there's this class code up here. And if you click the little display box or the little box beside it, it'll make it bigger. So this class code is a code where your students can type that in by hitting the Join Class button that we saw earlier and typing this in. And it'll enroll them in your class so then they can see content. Because of that, you don't necessarily want to share this code around because you don't want to get extra people coming out. That said, with your education classroom, only people with your school's education accounts can join the classroom. The other part is there's a few things you'll see around here, but there is security settings and you can limit or restrict your classroom if you want. You can also personally enroll your students by going to the People tab. So a couple things before we go around there, just to show you. First thing, when you see the top and the left and the right part are similar to before, you'll have your settings and you'll have your hamburger button where you can access the rest of the classrooms. Up here, top left corner, you'll see your name, section, all that, so you know which class you're in. And of course, it also displays here. This first page is called your stream. It acts kind of like social media, where you have your Facebook timeline or your Twitter feed. So, you can limit the stream if you want, but right off the bat, essentially, your students can post in the stream if they want, and you can post in the stream. When you create Classwork, it'll pop up in here. If you want to create an announcement, you can jump in there. Students can ask questions in there. Posts and pictures can be put on there. So it's really a neat idea to add to the social aspect of learning in this digital sense. But it's just like Facebook. You have this share thing. If you click it, it'll give you a little tutorial warning, but essentially you can pick which class it is. If you want to post a general announcement for all your classes, you can actually select individual students once you have students in your class, and then you can put a message. So how about, this is my first post. And then you have the option to add attachments. And this is something you'll see throughout Google Classroom. So you can attach stuff from Google Drive directly, you can add links, you can attach an external file, or you could put a YouTube video directly on there. So, let's put a YouTube video. And let's just do, we said this is, let's put the alphabets on, why not? Okay, so maybe this ABC song is the one we want. So we're going to add that. And when you come down here, there's the post button. If you hit post, that'll go directly on there. There's this little down menu. If you go there, it gives you a few options. So you have post again. You could save it as a draft, which will do this. And then you see saved announcements. You can then come up and resume it if you want to post it later. You can also schedule it to post at a later time. So you can pick the actual day and time if you want to schedule a post for the next day. This is good for any night owls who like to work in the later hours. You could post stuff and schedule it for 6 a.m. in the morning, so then you're not bothering students at night. But anyways, I'm just going to hit post so you can see what it looks like when it's post. It'll give you a warning because this is immediately available if you hit post, and then it's created. So that's kind of the basics of the stream. The only other couple things on here, you can click this little down part and it shows you the subject again. And then you can change your theme or upload a photo. So I'm going to pick this because I think the colors are cooler. So when you change your theme, that changes this up here. That changes kind of all the accent colors if there is any. So up here it'll be gray now. When you go to the left side, the classroom will be gray. So the theme does essentially just the color in all throughout Classroom and its icons. And it also changes the banner. And if you want an individualized photo, you can upload your own photo. Now, before we go to these other tabs, I'm going to go to the little settings cog in the top corner. So if you look at the top right corner, there's this new cog. This is your class settings. You want to go through this before you start inviting students. So you'll see these options. These are the ones you initially created. You can always edit them. You can change your classroom name even. So this isn't set in stone. It gives you some options to add stuff. You can add a little class description. So if you have a basic syllabus or a basic class description that you're required to put in your gradebook in your normal school setting, you could put that there for your students. When you scroll down a bit, you have your class code and a little down arrow, and it gives you some options to disable it. So you could disable it entirely, which makes it so people can't join your class using the class code. This is good if you want to prevent random students from joining. You can invite your individual students, or you could leave it on until you have all your students and then disable it once you have all your students in the class. There's also a direct copy button that you could click, or a reset, which would change the code. Now, stream, this is that social media page. You can decide, do you want students to post and comment? Do you want them just to be able to comment, or do you just want you to be on there? So I generally wouldn't go strictly to the teachers only can post, but depending on how your class is set up, you might want that. A good option in the middle is literally the middle option there. Because if you do that one, that means you're the only one that can post, but students have the option to ask questions if they need. They can comment and reply to your posts then. I'm going to leave it at the top one. Now, classwork on the stream. This is, do you want the classwork hidden entirely, show condensed ones, or show the full details? So this is when we start adding assignments and materials. They could share to the stream. If you have this one, they won't. If you have this one, they will, and they'll just give a material was posted with the name. And if you pick the top one, it'll show the full assignment in the stream. So I generally prefer this one, but it depends on what you're doing, and maybe you prefer the other one. That's totally preference. And then show deleted items. Only teachers can view deleted items, or everyone. Just leave it off. It's not really needed. This is if you delete posts or comments. You can turn it on if you're looking for something you deleted. The last section is grading. So there is a gradebook built into Google Classroom. It actually also gives you options to export as a CVS file or a comma-separated file. So this is good if you want to use the grading system on here and then import it to another grading program that your school is using. You can do that. But when you're looking directly in here, you have a couple choices. So the overall grade calculation, choose a grading system. You could just leave it at no overall grade. So that's if you just want to use individual assignment grades, but you're ultimately using your other grading system, do that. If you want the student's grade to show in here, then you need to pick a system. So you can either do total points, which is just, it'll accumulate all of the values for the assignments and find their total points that way. So the total points they've earned divided by the total points of all the assignments combined. Or you can create categories, which I think is more common. This is what a lot of schools use. If you're using Pearson Power School, this is very common. So then you can create categories such as a test category that's worth 20%, or a final that's worth 10%, or assignments that are worth 40%, projects worth 30%. So that's what the categories are for. And then again, you can show overall grade to student or hide it if you want still. That's good if you want to use this grading system for yourself, but you don't want your students to be referencing this grade in case of mistakes. And then you can add your grade categories down here. So part 1, let's say assignments can be 40%. And it'll actually tell you your remaining percentage you need to cover. So then projects are going to be 25. Tests are going to be 20. And the final exam is going to be 15. And this would, of course, look different for every single class. This will look especially different if you're in elementary. But if you want to use grading categories, that's a really good way to do that. And I would usually recommend using it even if you're not going to use a bunch of them, because then you can separate your assignments from your tests. So then if you need to change stuff later, it's easy just to add a different category. But that's kind of your options for class settings. So once you go through that and get that all determined, you're ready to save, top right corner. And then your class is theoretically ready for your students to join now. So at that point in time, you could send out the class code via email. A lot of teachers will write the class code on their chalkboard or whiteboard. Anything you want to do that way, you could print it off and give it to your students, but the class code is how they can join unless you've disabled it. The other way to join would be to jump over to the People tab at the top. And my current account is called ZappyLoom because I'm using one of my aliases, but in this part, if it's a brand new classroom, this is what you'll see on this People tab. So the idea is you can go in and you can invite students to be part of the classroom. So in mine, it's not going to show much. I could just add an email. And if it's a correct one, it'll show up and let you invite it. So that person's now invited. Alternatively, if that was a mistake, you can always remove it. And if you want to create co-teachers, this is the way you have to do it. So if you have a coworker you want to add to this, whether it be for actual co-teaching, sharing of resources, perhaps slight collaboration, maybe this is elementary school and you want to add the music teacher and the French teacher so they can put resources in here for French and music, whatever you want. But if you want to do something like that, then you just need to go up here and invite a teacher. And when you do that, they'll have all of the options of you except for deleting teachers and create kind of more of the higher admin stuff, but they have mostly the same options as you, so they can function as a full teacher using the classroom. So that's another way to add students, and then once your students are added, you're going to have a list down here with all of your students. As you saw here, you could click individual ones and then email them, and what that'll do is it'll pull up Gmail with a message and let you just send a direct email. Depending on how far you get in, the education version of this has options to add parent emails so they can get notifications for classwork and other stuff, and there'll be a little menu on the side of the student's name for that. Now we're going to move over to the Classwork tab. So here's your classwork, and a couple things to show here. Essentially, this is going to be a big list of items. You're going to see assignments and materials and topics and everything show up in the middle as a big list in order, and you can change the order of those. On the left side, If you create topics, in that blank space, the topics will show up. So those are kind of your bigger categories if you want to split up the content. You might want to do, I would generally do a main one, a first topic that says classroom resources or something like that. Essentially your main category or your main topic at the top. And now you can see all topics or classroom resources on the side. So this is where I would put my outline or my calculator policy in cases of high school math. Or maybe you have general resources you want them to be able to see right away, and that's something that goes through the whole way through, such as expectations or other rules like that, instructions on how to submit assignments. You could add those in the classroom resources and keep it at the top, and that's a nice way to separate that. And then for other sections or other topics, a lot of people, again, go to create, like to do, say, there's generally a few different ways to do it. You could separate it by unit. So you could do unit 1, 2, 3, 4 and have everything for that unit in that section. You could do assignments and exams and projects and separate it by essentially the type of marked item or the type of resource. You could do a bit of a hybrid approach. So you could do exams, tests. You might want to do exams, assignments, and then after that, and I guess just to show you to move these around, if you move your mouse over the name of the topic and click and hold, you can drag that to sort them. And when you have materials inside a topic, if you move the entire topic, the resources will follow it. And then I'm just going to add one materials. So this is a way a lot of people like to do it, or this is a hybrid way that some people like to do it, I guess I should say. So you have your resources, and then you separate out your assessments and your assignments, and then just general materials. So you might have notes in the materials, but then your marked assignments will show up near the top. It's an approach. You need to find one that works for you, but play around with it, see, talk with your students, connect with them, figure out what changes might work for them. But that's your topics. They're kind of section dividers. Another thing you have here is a create assignment, a quiz assignment, a question, a material, and an option to reuse a post. So if you go to create assignment, this is kind of the general one. I'll show you that. Okay, so create an assignment. You'll get a page like this. Kind of looks like you're doing a post. The reason for that is it's going to show up as both it'll show up in your stream like a post, but it'll show up in Classwork as an assignment. So you can create the title. The intro assignment is what I'm going to call this. And then next you have instructions, and it says optional. It's because you don't need to put anything here. I don't like instructions necessarily. I would call this the description part. So personally, the way I did a lot of stuff is I would attach a PDF or a Google Docs file that has the full assignment outline. This gives you some freedom for formatting. You can make it prettier. You can make it a bit more creative. You can add bulleted lists and stuff and just make it a lot more detailed that way. And then in this part, I would just add a basic description. This is your assignment for Unit 1, Section 1, or something like that. You know, you can put little references in there, but that's just more of a description, if anything. So this instructions box is more of a brief description. Now, do know that's not the case. You could use this for your full class instructions. I just find it's a bit easier to attach a file, and it's a bit more readable for students that way sometimes. But that's what the instructions are, and that's why it's optional. Now, if you go down here, you have two buttons. One is Add and one is Create. So first I'm going to show you Create. So if you click on Create, you're going to get 5 options. It's to create a doc, slide, sheet, drawing, or form. Now, if you're recognizing these icons and names, it's because this is your Google Document suite. So this is all the files you can create in Google Drive, and then they're actually directly attached to this. So I don't think I mentioned this before, but if you didn't know about this, Google Classroom is kind of a front face for an advanced system of Google Drive. So essentially, this is to replace if you were just going to do everything in Google Drive and create individual folder for your students to share files back and forth. It gets nightmarish. The idea behind Google Classroom is you can post materials and share stuff, and it will do the sorting for you behind the scenes. So some of you will notice if you go into Google Drive after you've created a classroom, there's actually a folder that says Classroom, and when you open that up, it shows a bunch of folders and a bunch of classroom folders. Essentially everything that happens in Classroom gets stored in Google Drive still, but the Classroom application automatically sorts stuff for you and organizes it, so you don't need to worry about the advanced file system because you can find it all in the front face and service of Google Classroom. So that's the background behind that, but the nice part with that integration is you can create a file directly here. So if this is new, you can straight up just hit Docs, and it creates a Google Doc for you, opens it up, and now you can create your instructions or create a material that you want to send. So some things you might want to attach there are your assignment outline, instructions, maybe a resource page, and you can also attach. So this is the create portion. You might not want to do that, but the other big thing is if you want to create a template for your students or something for them to start off with, a guide, anything like that. This is an idea for that. So create a name for it. That's big. I'm going to call this the intro assignment template. And then you can just create it however you want in here. If you want to do all of your own formatting, you can. If you want to go simpler, there is the styles function, just like Microsoft Word. So intro assignment. And then you can do stuff like create name. And just leave that blank so they'll add their name there. Date. Teacher. And here's where if you want the teacher's name on there, you can add your teacher here. You can add your name directly in. So if you want to create it and kind of start that, you can. You could also leave it blank and see how many students read that by seeing if they add teacher. And then maybe you want to say question 1. Interview responses. Question 2. And this is just a very probably crappy version of an outline that you might want to do for an interview assignment. And you could also, of course, go through, copy and paste, add more. You can create a table if you want. Whatever you need. It's Google Docs is, for all intents and purposes, a Microsoft Word equivalent. It is missing a couple of the more advanced formatting features and styling features, but in all reality, you don't need those for most reasons in education and academics. And realistically, in life too. I know a lot of people don't like it because if you convert between the two, sometimes there's styling and formatting issues, but the reality is if you're using Google Classroom and your students are using Google Docs, you should learn how to use Google Docs because it'll help you work with your students a lot better. Now, let's say this is done. It very much wouldn't be if this was real, but let's say this is done. I've created an intro assignment template. I can just go up and close this now. If you're worried, just check here and make sure it says all changes are saved. Google Docs autosaves. So now that I closed that, if this shows up, you can read it. I'm going to close it. It'll say Untitled Document. That's because this hasn't updated. By the time you publish this, the name will show up there. But essentially, now that we created that, we can see that it shows up here, and there's this option for students can view the file with a drop-down. Click that drop-down, and I want you to see these. So you get 3 options when you attach a file to Google Drive. To Google Classroom assignments. So when you create an assignment, you have 3 options when you attach a file. And in particular, this is for Google Docs files, but you'll see it applies to other stuff too. So when you create something like this, you can either make the students view the file, you can allow them to edit the file, or you can allow it to make a copy for each student. So if you're going to be posting examples of good work, if you're going to be posting instructions, guidelines, tips and tricks, anything like that where it's for them essentially reading material or reference material, that's when you want it to be students can view the file. If you're going to do a collaborative thing, so say they're doing a group portfolio and you assign these to individual groups, or say you're doing a classroom assignment during class and maybe you have a Google Slides, then each student has to make an individual slide or work together somehow. That's where you can do students can edit the file. But know that when students can edit the file, this is talking about the individual file that you created. Every student will be able to go in and make modifications to that. So be very wary when you do that and make sure you know why you're doing it. It should be for a particular purpose. There's not many reasons you want the students to edit your original files. The last option, and I will quote the words of my colleague Jason, he calls this the photocopier. He is an English teacher who has went fully digital for the past few years, and the idea is he uses this a lot. Make a copy for each student. It seems so small, but it is so powerful, and this is where the Google Classroom does the Google Drive work for you. So that template we created, by picking this make a copy for each student, it is going to copy that file for every single student in your classroom, put it in each of their Google Drives with them as ownership. It'll be shared to you so you can still see the file and access it, but they can edit it and it's not going to be visible to other students. So this is like you photocopying a template and handing it out to each of them on their desks, except it goes directly to their computer. So this is your photocopier. Remember that. If you want to hand out a template or do something like that, this is the photocopier. So now we've created a template. Let's say you have another file you want to put on there. You can create another one if you need, or if you want to create a form, say this is interest, you could create a Google form for getting all of their interests and stuff. But now you go to add, and it gives you a couple of other options. So add is for pre-existing files. You can click Google Drive if you want to add an existing file that's in your account's Google Drive storage. You could also just add a link. So if you add a link, it might be to say bookmark this, and I'll put classroom.google.com. So now the link shows up there and it goes to Google Classroom, and you can tell them to bookmark that. The next one is file. So this is if you want to attach external files that are on your computer. Now, in general, especially when you're working with laptops and especially when you're working with Google Drive and Google Classroom, I would recommend uploading all of your files to Google Drive. If you're allowed to use the sync application, you can always sync and have your Word files and stuff usable by adding them to the Google Drive that way. But it is a good idea to have everything in the cloud storage, so then that if your laptop dies, you don't lose stuff, or if you USB drives, you don't lose stuff. So just a tip there. But if you have external files, there's the file option. And then you could also add YouTube videos directly on here. As you saw earlier, it's the exact same thing, just in an assignment. On the right side, you'll see 4. This looks weird at first, but the idea is if you have multiple classrooms, maybe you're doing 3 of the same subject sections. So in high school, maybe you're doing 2 English or 3 English 12s. You can create one assignment and pick multiple classrooms to post it in. So you can post the same assignment to 3 of your classrooms. So that's an option just to save you some work and duplication. You could also pick individual students or all students. So if you had students in your classroom, they're going to show up and list here. The good part about that is if you're going to create a specialized assignment for an individual student, maybe they have a record of adaptation or a inclusion plan, IIP, IEP, whatever it's called in your district. That's an option for you to create an assignment for everyone else and just untick that student and then create an adapted assignment that only that student can see. Now, grade category, as you saw, we have those. So I'm just going to put this in assignments. And then you can just pick the points you want this to have, or you can make it ungraded as another option. So that's good for formative stuff. If you want points, you can add points. I'm just going to make it 10 points. Due date. Now, you don't need a due date, especially if this is something like an intro assignment, but you probably be best to have one. It does give the students notifications and a bit of an incentive. But if you click due date, it says no due date. You can click again, and it'll give you a little calendar to pick from. So let's say this is due on a Friday. Awesome. Are we done? Some would say yes. If you click away, it'll just say it's due Friday, April 10th. I personally don't think this is enough. I think it's not a lot of work to add a timestamp, and it does wonders for anxiety on your students. This is a day and age where a lot of the time we know the exact time something is due because of two reasons. One being that online resources have allowed us to do a lot of stuff after hours, so stuff can be due at 8 p.m. or it could be the next morning at 8 a.m. This is also something where you'll see a lot of ambiguity between what midnight means. So if we look at the definition, midnight means it's the first hour of the day. 12 a.m. is the beginning of the day. So if you say midnight on Wednesday, that actually means Wednesday morning. But unfortunately, some businesses, some academics, some other stuff, society's created a unknown variable here where midnight on Wednesday might mean that evening for some people. So this is actually a very real issue, and I don't understand why it's become an issue, but because of that, it's a good idea to add a timestamp so people know exactly when and don't ever use midnight. So the nice part about this is you picked your date, right? You see the time thing? If you just want it due by the end of the day, just click time and it automatically adds 11:59 p.m. for you. And you can leave it like that. That's easy enough to add, and that helps your students know exactly how long they have. And if you want it due by the end of the school day, then maybe you want to go in here and do 4 p.m. instead. That's an option. So that's your due date. Topic, we created those topics, so I'm just going to put this in assignments. Rubric, this is new as of February 2020. So you can actually add a rubric directly in here. You can create your rubrics in Google Sheets and import them, or you can create it right in the assignment or reuse an old one once you have a few rubrics created. So I'm going to create one just to show you, but I'm not going to set it up. And this is actually new to me too. So you'll see intro assignment, add the criteria. It has a little menu here to delete it if you don't want it. You have use scoring. Show the points in order of descendant or ascendant. So you can have it go 1, 2, 3, 4 or 4, 3, 2, 1. And then you can create your criterion, title, and description, points required, and add new criterion. So maybe you want to do grammar. And then you can create points required, 10, and you can create different level titles. So points required 5, points required 3, 1. So whatever you want to do, essentially this is your rubric. So the grammar is your left rows, your left column. It shows your different sections. The points are your top row to define each column, or whichever way you put it. The points are the different levels of score. The criterion are your different sections of grading. So you can add new criterion. And the nice part is you can actually create different point scales per criterion in this case. So this is something you definitely want to play around with it before you get into using it. But it's a pretty powerful tool. Improves a bit on what rubrics traditionally are and some of their flaws in terms of different point scales. But it is built right in there, and then you can use this to grade right away. So I'm going to just save this as is so we have it. Oh, where's the error? I made an extra criterion, so I'm going to delete this criterion. Okay, so now we're going to hit save just so it's there, and you'll see rubric 1 criterion, 10 points. That is the long way of showing you how to do an assignment. This shouldn't really take you as long to just create this page, but I wanted to go through and show you each individual part. Once you're done and you have everything added you wanted, you need to go up to the top left corner and you can either hit assign, which will post it immediately for the students to see, or you can do the drop down. It lets you save a draft if you have it partially started and you want to come back and add stuff later, or schedule if, like you said, or like I said earlier, you want to send it in the morning. So I used schedule a lot because I sometimes was doing stuff at 11:30 p.m. and you don't necessarily want to send a notification to all your students at that time. Parents might not be impressed about that. But those are your options. You can also discard draft. So I'm just going to hit assign and it'll show up. And now you'll see under the assignment section, the intro assignment is there. Now, quickly to show you a couple other things before I close this video off, since this is just the introduction. The other stuff you might want to add, like I said, is a course outline or something. So if you go create, we just showed you assignment. Quiz assignment creates a Google form built into the assignment so you could do little quizzes or tests online. Question lets you just ask a general question. So what is your favorite food? You can do that, and then you can choose whether you want it to be multiple choice, and you add options for a poll, or if you just want a short answer. You can also add materials if you really wanted, so maybe you want to make it a response. You'll add a reading on there, and then add a respond to this question. Those are just some ways you can use this. In math, I used this as a reflection sometimes. You can do journals through this. It has a lot of the same stuff as assignments otherwise, but it's a question problem, so it's actually going to give you responses back. And then you have an option for students to reply to each other, or students can edit their answer. Students editing their answers would be more of a journal thing where they might want to go back and update it. You can use that if you want. It depends on what your assignment is. Students can reply to each other is a big one. If you have that on, then the students are allowed to see each other's posts and reply to them, and it's more of a discussion. If you have it off, it's more of a self-reflection. You can also pick topics. I'm going to put this in the classroom resources because it's at the top, it's the beginning. There's no real rhyme or reason for that. And then again, due date, maybe that's by the end of today. So we'll do the end of tomorrow, sorry, 11:59 p.m. And it's ask instead of assign, but it's all the same stuff up there. Now, the other thing you can create in here is a material. Material is for anything you're attaching, any resource you want to just give to your students. So this is your syllabus. This is if you have notes that you want to post. This is if you have a reading you want them to have. So if you're going to be doing an assignment and you have resources for that assignment, attach them to the assignment. But if you're going to do something totally separate from their assignments, this is what the materials are for. So if you're doing something where they have to respond to a reading, then I would recommend put the reading in an assignment. Attach it to the assignment that they have to respond to. But if you're not doing that type of thing, or if you're doing a whole bunch of stuff using that reading, then create a material so that they can reference it. And then if you want later on, you can attach it to individual assignments as well so they can see it directly in the assignment. But this is a difference. Use it wisely. Materials are static. You just post them and they're a resource that they can view. Assignments are interactive. So I'm not going to add anything on here, but again, it's a lot of the same stuff. You have no grades for this because it's just a resource, but you can put it where you need. So if this was, say, a syllabus, you can either attach a PDF, use Google Drive to add it, or just create it right away in here and then post it. Instead, I'm going to back out because I don't have one. And then the last thing we haven't looked at is reuse post. This is less useful for you at the beginning, but as you create classrooms, create assignments, as you're a bit more experienced in your use of Google Classroom, you can click reuse post and it'll show you posts and assignments from your other classes. So you can select a class. Right now it's only showing that because that's my only class, but essentially this is going to show you all of your classes since the beginning. And if you archive classes at the end of the semester, you can just leave them. No one can view it then except for you, and you're able to reuse assignments from that archived class. So it's a good way to use old materials. Lastly, if you look on here, there's a class drive folder and there's Google Classroom. Google Calendar. We'll talk about Google Calendar in another one, but if you click this, it'll jump you to a Google Calendar that is shared with all of your students. And so when you look, sorry, this is the first time using it with this account. If you look in the bottom left corner in your calendar list, you'll see My First Classroom Period 2 Winter 2020. That is this calendar that it jumped you to. So if you add events to this calendar, every one of your students are going to see those. You can already see the intro assignment shows up here. So the calendar is used to provide notifications for assignment due dates and resource due dates, anything like that related to your assignments. But alternatively, you could use this to post, say, an event each day for what you covered that day if you wanted. Or if you want to do a reminder for something, maybe remind them that we're going to be in a different room, you could put that in here and that'll show up on their phones. The key is to coordinate with your students and make sure they have notifications on for Google Classroom, Google Calendar, and Gmail on their phones. Because if they do that and they have those apps, then you can communicate with them clearly and they can work with that too. But that's what the calendar is. If I back up, the other one you see is the class drive folder. Like I told you earlier, Google Classroom is a front face for a complicated system within Google Drive. If you click this button, it's going to show you that system. So I'm going to click it to show you, but you really have no reason to go here. So as you see, My Drive Classroom, and then it has the name of this classroom. This is what I'm talking about. You'll see a classroom folder in your Google Drive, and then it'll have all of your classrooms in it. Students get this as well, and any resources related to that classroom that are shared with them will show up in there. So if I'm looking at My First Classroom, we see general files. There's the intro assignment template. There's also template do not edit. And there's the intro assignment. So the templates do not edit, that's going to be where it's copying that to new students. So the reason you don't want to edit that is because if you get a new student in the classroom or if you need to reassign it, it'll copy it. That's essentially the base for everyone else's files. And then the intro assignment, this is where it's going to dump all the assignments when other people submit. So again, you don't ever really need to go here because Google Classroom does everything for you, but if you have issues or you need to find a file, that is always a way to do it if you're just absolutely not having luck in here. The last part is grades, and it doesn't show any on here, but you can find some stuff as we go. I can maybe post something about this later, but grades will show you a list of your students on the left side and a list of assignments in the top row. And then in the middle you get a grid, and it'll show you the student's score or lack of submission or stuff like that. And if you can click on the little menu, there will be 3-dot menu on each of the grid squares. It'll allow you to view the submission from that student for student X on assignment 3. So that's what the grades does. You can use this however much you want, whether you want to be more involved or less involved, whether you want to use this primarily or use your school's grading system primarily, that's your choice, but that's what grades are for. So that's all I'm going to show you for now. As I get people requesting tutorials, I will give more tutorials that we can add in. But that's Google Classroom in a gist. I realize I'm looking and this is 45 minutes, but I wanted to give you a good overview so you can see every single little detail. The last part just to kind of look at is down here. There's this little question box. If you click that, there's a what's new box, a report a issue or request a feature, help center, and help community. I want to highlight the report version. So this is send feedback, and you can include a screenshot or not. This is if you're having an issue, but the other big part, especially if you're using an education account from your school, is you can request features here. And don't think like I'm just a teacher from this so and so small town. Google does read these. Stuff like the add a co-teacher feature, that was something that came from this. The grading and the rubric features came from this. This is actually real feedback that they look at because they're designing this product for you as an educator. So if you think of something that's not here that you need, put it on there. They might contact you if there is a feature already there that you don't know about, and they might take it in consideration for new features. So just know about that and use it. It's a good thing to ask. So that's my basic overview of Google Classroom. Again, sorry, it's about 47 minutes. I'll put some timestamps in there so you can skip ahead, but I hope this gave you a bit of an idea of everything in the basic idea of creating a classroom. Now, what I did in 45 minutes, you should be able to do in closer to 10 minutes, and then add assignments as you need, but that was kind of the deeper dive into it. Once you have more classrooms created, you'll see them down here, like I said. There's also a teaching tab and an enroll tab for the classes you're a student in or a teacher in. And there's these to-do lists. I wouldn't normally look at them. They kind of just make me stressed out. But if you want to look at this, it gives you to review and everything you've reviewed. So it kind of gives you an overview of your work for all of your classes if you want. But that's my basic overview. I hope that helped. If you have questions, comment at the bottom and I can respond. And if you have ideas for another video or feature you need, or maybe you want to do a particular assignment, either comment down there or message me, or you can tweet me at WebTheFox on Twitter. So that's all, and I hope this helps. Have a great time.